Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with French-based artist and jazz singer Natacha Atlas. She talked about the vision of her new 2019 CD called Strange Days. This internationally acclaimed artist has one of the world's most distinctive voices. Long known for synthesizing Western and Middle Eastern vocal traditions with mind-blowing dexterity, she began her career as a part of the world fusion group called Transglobal Underground that has led to work with the likes of Peter Gabriel and the Indigo Girls, along with many others. Over the years, she has been repeatedly recognized by her peers and fans with a host of awards, so please get to know her and dig this interview, my friends. Thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today. I really appreciate it.
I'm delighted. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Talk to me about your latest CD, Strange Days. Give me an idea of what your artistic vision for this project was.
Well, I guess it's a little bit of a dystopian fantasy, I guess. It's sort of songs are kind of laments about how society and how the world is functioning, albeit in a dysfunctional way. And then other songs are sort of more like protests, and then there's a little bit of romance in there as well, as in kind of almost like sort of a hopeful, whimsical kind of hope that things could actually improve. So I guess somebody described it as a darkly dystopian jazz fantasy with Arabic influence, which is probably how I'd sort of describe it.
Let me get an idea of how you arrived at where you're at right now and with your sound and how this all evolved. Where were you born and raised?
Well, I was actually born in Belgium of Anglo-Egyptian parentage. I mean, I did live in Egypt for a time as well, but that was later on. I'd just like to point out that my co-composer, who was brought up with jazz, is from Egypt, Alexandria, and his parents were really into jazz, really sort of hardcore jazz, if you know what I mean, bebop and stuff. And so Sammy was brought up with that. So he was in Alexandria, and I was sort of in Europe, and then we kind of swapped over, where he was in London for a time and I was living in Egypt, and then finally we met, and then he kind of introduced me to a lot more profound jazz. I'd kind of describe it as profound jazz, as opposed to the jazz I was listening to when I was 14 was more like, Frank Sinatra and big band stuff. And then Sammy Bechet introduced me to a jazz like Lenny Tristano and Bill Evans and that kind of thing.
So how did you start out with playing music and getting into the jazz world? How did that happen for you?
I guess it happened probably about sort of 7 or 8 years ago. What happened was that, I was in a more kind of world music vein of sort of doing things. But then my musicians, I was getting to know musicians who were jazz musicians primarily, who had a love for Arabic music. And so because they were jazz musicians, I started to sort of feel that I wanted to know more about jazz. And then I met Sammy Bechet, who's the violinist, co-composer on this album. And it sort of took off because the jazz musicians that are on the album are the jazz musicians that I've been working with for the past, 8 years or so.
Your career has obviously taken off. You have people like the Indigo Girls and Peter Gabriel and a lot of other artists on your resume. How did these opportunities come up, and what did you learn from big acts like that?
When I started out, I had a big hit in France with a song that was in the charts. And then from there, I just got a lot of opportunities. People would come to me like Peter Gabriel, and then a request from the Indigo Girls, and lots of other well-known musicians that I've sort of collaborated with over the years. And I think it was just the fact that, back in the early 90s, world music was having a bit of a field day, and there were a lot of world music festivals around, like the WOMAD festival. That was all over the world at one point. I got around. I did quite a lot of festivals in America as well, and Canada. And so, just I guess the process of being around and being heard by lots of different artists and that kind of thing basically opened me up to a range of possibilities with collaborations.
You have a very unique perspective. I mean, your sound's unique, and it's a real it's amalgamizing all of these different influences you have. You have the Arabic background, the Western background. How did you arrive at this unique sound, and how does that influence not only the way that you make music, but you also have a unique view on this modern world of ours, which is very intertwined and very confusing with everything that's Western and Arabic. How does that work for you?
I guess from the very beginning, because I am a duality of two cultures, so to speak. I've always wanted to make music that appealed to me on both sides. And so my original mission musically, I guess, was to sort of build a musical bridge. And I think that I did that in my own way for since the beginning. But then when I got introduced to jazz, I found that jazz has some things in common with Arabic music, and some things that are obviously very different. But the thing in common is the improvisational platform that jazz has, and that is very prevalent in Arabic music. The whole improvisational thing is very big in Arabic music. For me, the trick was actually finding a way for the two to exist, for the two to sort of intersect, because there are a surprising number of shared scales, albeit derived from very different theoretical starting points. But the trick is finding the route to a musical space where the two can coexist and that for me was the challenge, because we, on the Arabic side, I like to use scales that have quarter tones in them, and in Western music, quarter tones don't actually exist. So finding a way for them to appear in jazz was for me interesting, because I felt that jazz has a sort of a real openness. Jazz is a very rich and large language, and I feel that it's a language that I had to kind of get used to, because it wasn't something that I was very used to when in the early 90s, I didn't really know anything about jazz. And now I'm fascinated by the possibilities in jazz to sort of interact with Arabic music. So that's kind of now become my new mission.
Right on. What was one of the first live jazz shows that you saw that really blew your doors down?
Things in London at the various jazz venues that they have here, which is they're small, but like Ronnie Scott's and places like that, the Jazz Cafe. But actually, one of the groups that I saw really for the first time that was really jazz was actually my own pianist group, Alciona Mick. She's a jazz pianist she's not that well known, but in London, in the London jazz scene, people know her. And I just thought it was amazing. It was the first thing that I remember thinking, wow, that music is really intriguing, because, as I say, I had only skirted around the periphery of jazz before. So Alciona Mick was probably the first jazz artist that I saw, and she was in my band playing Arabic music years before.
So why do you love jazz?
Because I find that it's very varied. Jazz is very varied. I mean, to be honest, I haven't. If you was to ask me, who I love, I would probably say a couple of names that that I'm only just really beginning to explore, and that's as I mentioned before, Lenny Tristano. I'm getting really into him. Bill Evans, Miles Davis. I know everybody knows him. Thelonious Monk. I'm just starting to really get into to jazz as a language. For me, it's a language that is not immediate. You know, you have to take time and understand, because I come from a music that's very modal, and jazz is rife with chromatic harmonies and modulations. So I'm kind of, you know, feeling my way around this at the moment, and I'm finding it fascinating because it has space and it has there's room for things to happen that maybe it couldn't happen in other forms of music, like rock music, you know.
So if you were to come to Kansas City and perform at one of our clubs, say off 18th and Vine, and you had to let fans know prior to this what kind of show, what you would deliver, how would you describe what you do?
I guess I would call it Arabic jazz, and yet, I mean, there's more jazz influence at the moment than my previous musical style has had. You know, there's areas in when I'm on stage with my musicians, because they're all jazz musicians, we have areas where we improvise, and we'll be improvising around Arabic scales, or some of us, the melody instruments, like, for instance, trumpet, violin, and voice, will be improvising around Arabic scales. And sometimes that will be modal, and sometimes it won't be. It depends on the song. However, there's also my musicians, being, you know, real jazz musicians, will go into some bebop areas when they get to improvise. So, I mean, I think it really is jazz with a lot of Arabic influence.
So my final question is this. Everyone has a version or a perception of who they think you are. Your family, your friends, your fans, but you know who you are best. Tell me, who do you think you are?
I've always found that to be a kind of difficult question, because I feel that the way people on the outside see you is nothing is not. I mean, I have a vision of myself which is probably completely false, but I would say that I am definitely, for me and for the people that I work with, a duality between the East and West. That's why I express myself in the way that I do musically. I have elements of the Arabic mentality, and I have elements of Western mentality, and I tend to vacillate between the two. But my tonality musically of singing is very much probably more Arabic than anything else. And then instrumentally, I again vacillate between Arabic music and Western music. So, and I feel that my personality does the same thing, really.
Right on. That's a great answer. That's a great way to wrap everything up. Thank you for taking some time out with Neon Jazz today. Good luck with everything, and hopefully we do see you swing through Kansas City.
I really hope so too. I'm as I say, this jazz is a truly American art form, and I know that it's developing in other areas too. But I'm fascinated by it more and more. So I do hope that we get over and play some gigs in the States.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest singers in Egypt, Europe, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Natacha for her time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.